I'm just desperately admitting everyone.
Good on you.
Oh, look, I figured someone's got to do it. Michael Osborne's going to be late. Angus said he was coming.
Megan's an apology.
Okay. Maybe we wore everyone out at the Connectathon yesterday. Give it another minute or two. If before we start, anyone's got any time and they want to have a look at the minutes of the previous meeting, can you just throw in a link to that? I've got them open somewhere too. Oh, Nicholas Ferris, we see a lovely black stripe. There must be something in front of your camera. Ah, there we go. Alrighty.
Hello.
Oh, still coming in.
Admit.
I was just waiting for the masses to slow down. I think we're good. Yeah. Sharing. This is today's agenda. The main thing I think we're going to look at today is we're going to go back and hopefully continue, albeit briefly, our specimen discussion. But there's also an issue that has cropped up with eRequesting 1.0.0 that we want to briefly talk about, which is kind of precipitated the need for a Errata publication. So I'll have a bit of discussion about that. And David Willick had a couple of issues we want to talk about, but I think he's an apology. So we'll raise them, but probably not do the justice that David would have given them. Oh, still coming. Does anyone have any additional things they want to cover at today's meeting?
Do we talk about the Connectathon at all in a summary sense?
Yeah, we'll do that after we do the approval of minutes, maybe. So let me jump to minutes from 2 weeks ago. I think, as far as I recall, most of it was around Specimen. I think it was all Specimen, to be honest, at that point. Does anyone have any issues with the minutes? Does anyone want to put a motion forward to accept the minutes from 2 weeks ago?
I'll put a motion forward to accept the minutes from 2 weeks ago.
Thanks, Angus. I think you're even there. Anyone want to second it?
Seconded.
Oh,
Who was that? Sorry.
Dan or Omerod.
Okay, thanks,
excellent.
Dan.
Thank you. Alrighty. Today. Okay, let's we do a brief description of what's gone on the last 2 days at the Connectathon. I don't know how many of you were there.
Are we going to vote on that, Andy?
Oh, good point,
Sorry.
David. I knew I'm too tired. Right. Does anyone wish to vote against accepting the minutes? Raise your hand. Does anyone wish to abstain? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. Hands down, and we will assume the rest have taken up the third option, which is positive. And if you count me out, how many does that give us?
That's
Oh, you can-
25.
Okay.
That's -5. That's -6, 19. Are there any AI thingies?
Oh yeah, there are. Oh, how many do I see? 1, 2,
Russian
2.
assistant.
2, so it's 25 -7, 18. Okay, thanks.
And you've discounted me?
Oh no, 17.
Okay. That's still good.
Thanks.
I think that's still to accept the minutes.
That's the maths done for the day.
Excellent. You can rest. The Connectathon. So Connectathon was held in Brisbane for the last 2 days. It was a bit of a different Connectathon than we normally hold because it was having a focus and a track around connected care, as in the department's connected care demonstrator that was done in Canberra last November. So that had 2 individuals that were kind of moving through a healthcare or through 2 healthcare journeys, and it highlighted a whole bunch of healthcare outcomes and healthcare kind of engagements with the healthcare system, trying to create a demonstration of connectedness. And in November, it was about kind of connectedness as we see it in the future. And then in the last 2 days, that track was trying to give some more reality to it. So it was trying to use that script as a focus for those at the Connectathon to build out some of the connections. I don't know. I'll just go through and say what I thought of it. I think the focus point of having that script sitting behind it, I think, is really useful, because I think otherwise a group like a track like eRequesting, I think, struggles for any focus. So it's just general eRequesting, whereas that was very specific about the kinds of requests that kind of matched into the scenarios that were agreed to. So that worked out quite well. we will see what happens going forward for the Melbourne Connectathon, whether we continue with that track or theme, and potentially how we might look at augmenting it to explore other aspects of care that could be shared across the different stakeholders who come along to the Connectathon. The other thing we did at the Connectathon is we did put up a server that had our CI build in it, and that included the bundle profile. So at least Michael Osborne and I both managed to build eRequesting bundles that linked to the profile and had them validated going into a small CDR instance that was loaded with that CI build. The CI build was linked back to the balloted implementation guides for AU Core and AU Base. So that's AU Base version 7, release 7, and AU Core 3, just because the data we were using was had a dependency on the new way of doing APNs for organizations. Anyway, Angus, what did you reckon?
Yeah, I had a breakout session that I did, and it started to talk about pathology results. And maybe if I just show one diagram, is the key diagram we showed and discussed. And this was really just starting to steer the ship maybe into like where are we going for results. And this is work that's been happening in AU Core and AU Base about sort of the foundations, and we're just presenting this future state model in order to make sure those fundamental decisions being made down in AU Base today are aligned where we think we're going, or at least where I think we're going. None of this is voted on, so this thing on, you know, this is kind of like the 2-3 year journey ahead of us where we think maybe we're going now. So that's just a FHIR model mapped against a pathology report, and there's like arrows there that tell you like there's where all those things come into a pathology report, and we talked about that. And we talked about how pathology reports are constructed by laboratory systems. We talked about panels and how panels are sort of key to producing pathology reports, and then that led into this sort of structure that we're, you know, spitballing at the moment as like this is kind of where we think we're going. And one decision was made, which was that a decision was made in AU Core some weeks ago, and it sort of doubled down on that to say this is where we think we're going, this direction, as opposed to a slightly different model, which is this model, which is an EU model. I'm not going to go into the differences, but there's a slight difference. And I guess we made the decision that the diagnostic report.code will be the preferred RCPA requesting terminology sets, i.e. full blood count. I'll leave it there. There's lots in there, but we did an hour talking about that.
Are you happy to add that into the minutes of this call, that diagram?
That diagram? Yeah, I can. I've got I can take a screenshot of it. Yeah. Maybe send it to David. Yep.
Yeah, that'd be just useful. We do have every intention of kicking off the formal project around reporting for that kind of discussion to happen in. We were waiting on H7AU TSC to kind of begin to set up the process for generating the document needed to increment the eRequesting workgroup scope so that we could include reporting and also referrals into that scope. So we'll get back onto that now that TSC actually has a form that we can use to modify the working group's kind of intent. Anyone else at the Connectathon or have any questions about what it did or why it was doing it? Oh, it's a question from Stephen Chu.
Yeah, my slides. So my slides were gobbled up by the Sparked people. So where they've done with them. So the collateral's taken, Stephen, but I'm not sure where the collateral's being deployed. But they certainly came to me and got all my stuff.
Hopefully that was the H7AU people. Even if it was Spark people, H7AU people who happen to be contributed by Sparked.
Yes, all of the above.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. I don't think David Willick's here. So let me forge ahead. There are changes being made to or suggested ways forward with NPAAC in a review that's going on. So David wanted to remind this group that they really want to receive feedback around the NPAAC guidelines. There is a change that was made to the NPAAC guidelines to include references to fire as opposed to being locked into V2. I think it's a work in progress, to be honest. The starting point's there for it, but the way it's referenced is actually quite general, and I don't think necessarily makes it very clear on what the obligation is, whether it's a and or. It also doesn't specifically talk about eRequesting. Seemingly it talks about broader HS7AU fire standards, I think. So it would be useful if people could have a look at those NPAAC guidelines. So obviously the NPAAC guidelines refer to Safety and Quality Commission documents that are published, and they are kind of originating back in the RCPA QAP kind of program, who kind of initiates that thread. So be good to get feedback. If you go and dig them out and look up NPAAC guidelines and the release, the draft release that was made in the last couple of months, that would be good to receive. And I guess the other thing David is seeking out is a ways of working between the work we're doing around fire requesting, and as Angus has started to talk about reporting and how that could engage with the RCPA and the NPAAC work. Anyone else have any questions or anything they want to contribute around the NPAAC and RCPA work? Alrighty, moving on then.
Sorry, I had my hand up, Andy.
Ruben's got his hand up.
I should look at. Yep, Ruben.
He's ignoring you, Ruben.
Yeah, clearly. Just after, just on NPAAC again. So my understanding last time I looked was that it actually mandates the old HL7 Australia V2 spec for pathology. So I'm interested to know whether there's any sort of pathway being contemplated to move that to a fire spec in the future. Is that even come up yet, Andy?
So there's a new version of the connected systems NPAAC. There's an NPAAC spec that was the thing that pinned to V2. So there's a new spec going around. I think it's still in draft, which has added fire into it. I made some comments that I thought it added a bit too much fire into it. It kind of inferred to me that you could do fire results, which in the future is a thing, but in my view, the only thing you could do at the moment was eRequesting. So it is being addressed. Like there's a draft of the document that says you must do V2, which is now saying or fire, but it's still in draft. So the wheels are turning on that point.
Okay, so that's interesting. So when it says you can use fire, does it sort of stipulate an implementation guide, or is it just
and that
use
was
fire?
And that was my comment back. It from memory, it said it mentioned eRequesting IG and mentioned core, maybe base, and my take on it is it didn't single out requesting, right? It didn't. You know, in my view, today where we are now, I'd like this thing to say you can do eRequesting in V2 ADRM, you can do eReporting using ADRM, and you can do eRequesting using Fire eRequesting IG. But what you can't, in my view, do yet is Fire reporting because we have no IG or anything. And yet the words, and I gave my feedback, were a bit vague on that. They just sort of said there is an eRequesting IG and there is AU core and there is AU base and you can use Fire like that.
Right. Okay, I guess some work to do there.
Yeah.
Is this work group planning to provide a sort of response to that draft as a work group, or is it just individuals to respond if they get it?
We haven't discussed providing feedback as a work group. I've only given my personal feedback.
I think that's something worth considering. Because HL7 is being referenced here, including, I think I just looked at a document that spoke about AU core. It's the one that's in the chat. Thanks to Lise. You know, if they're going to be making references to the workgroup specs or HL7 Australia specs, then I think there should be some sort of HL7 based response to a draft that says those things. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
I just put the link in. I think it would be, I guess, worthwhile talking through what we would be seeking, what we think is a good idea. I find the language in this text quite confusing because the first paragraph doesn't really kind of link to the second paragraph on the current approved HL7 standards. So it's not clear how you should interpret that 4.1 in my mind. Like the first one says you must at a minimum do 2.4, but that doesn't, it's not then saying that HL7 fire is considered beyond the minimum. And so if you did fire, you would, there's some ordering here. I think what they were probably saying is you need to support 2.4, but you are able to do fire. And the issue we had before was because it only talked about V2.4, it was interpreted as using fire was not appropriate. And so I think they've now opened up to say, yes, you can support fire as well, but whether it's fire only or fire as well is, I guess, the question. In practicality, this is talking about accreditation of a pathology lab. Most pathology labs support a version 2 kind of basis. The issue around whether it's the right interpretation of version 2 or the wrong interpretation, I don't think is, I think that's a second issue to deal with. So kind of let's just pretend everyone's doing 2.4 appropriately. Then the firework at least now has validity in this space. I don't think it's saying that you, for every transaction, you must provide it both in version 2 and in fire. But that, I think, is the bit that's not clear to me in the wording.
Lots of hands
So
up.
if anyone, oh, are they excellent? That's what we like to see. All right, I'll start from the top. Delisi, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to let you know so I'm a NATA technical assessor, and I go around to the labs and I'm required to assess against this particular standard, which is really difficult in the first instance. But it's, as you can imagine, even more difficult when the requirements are not clear. And yeah, this change, version 6, was brought in recently in the last few weeks without due consultation. There were a lot of us who were caught by surprise by this, and you know, my concern is that none of this was communicated to any of the assessors, and to be able to assess against this consistently, you know, it's just impossible. So I think it was published prematurely, and yeah, they jumped the gun a bit, and there's a bit of work now to do to actually fix that problem. So I'll just say that there's a bit of activity going on to address it. And also, yeah, the IHE Australia group I think they were one of the groups that weren't sort of consulted, and you know, they're developing the tools to assess against ADRM currently, and not even the SPIA terminologies necessarily, but ADRM structurally. So yeah, anyway, just to say there's a bit of work going on there and a bit of clarification required. Yep,
that makes sense. I think probably for us, in some ways, it's the wording around how should the work of fire be actually best referenced, and that's, I think, something we need to work on. Dave McKillop.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. It's been a while since I've looked at the NPAAC, and I will need to put some time to do it, like Angus has done. But there's not, yeah, from my memory, there's not a lot of e-requesting in the NPAAC. It's all about reporting. And I think I agree with Angus that the fire's a bit early to get to be sort of stipulating fire when we haven't really got the like all the. And would be good to have some protocols happening, especially some of the more complex content. Otherwise, we'll end up a bit like V2 and everybody's gone off and done their own way how they think it should be done. Just IMO.
Ruben.
Yeah, agreeing with all the points so far. Just wanted to, for the record, note some of my concerns with the language here. I find it interesting that AU core is mentioned explicitly. Yeah. I would have thought that it's part of eRequesting. Yeah,
that was my point. It almost implies you can use core for reporting.
Yeah,
maybe.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's doing. The other thing is there's no versions associated with the fire IGs, which is a bit odd, especially when you consider that the version 2 localized for Australia spec actually has a version, at least in the form of a year point month, I suppose. And I think the biggest thing here is it talks about, so there's obviously HL7 Australia mentioned here, and obviously NPAAC is part of this. But then in a few instances, it makes reference to Australian approved HL7 fire standards. So who's the body that provides that approval?
NATA. I don't know. I'm guessing. I don't know. I agree. It's like someone.
We should clarify that too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think
Andy,
I think it's very poorly worded. The whole thing, like that whole statement, is very unclear.
Yep.
So NPAAC is responsible for stating the requirements. So they're responsible for this document. So that's the National Pathology Accreditation Advisory Council, and they are made up of pathology folks. There's and that's been one of my concerns as well, is that, you know, this is an interoperability document, and there's nobody on that council who are brought in from anywhere other than a, you know, pathology domain. So yeah, I think that needs to consult a bit more widely.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like the theme of what we'd like is, like, I can accept that still you must do V2 as per ADRM, and I think they kind of need to fork it a little bit and say, for reporting and orders you can do ADRM V2 2.4 ADRM, and then when they talk about fire, you sort of say, and you may also use eRequesting version release 1. And then that's it. Don't talk about core or anything. And obviously eRequesting is for requesting, not reporting. Like, that's kind of like where I wish they were. And to Andy's point, is it one or the other? Can I not do V2 ordering and just solely do fire eRequesting ordering? I'd like to think of eventually you can do one or the other or both, but I'm happy that at this point in time maybe you still have to do V2 and you can add fire on as well. I don't care. I just don't want it to infer that you do reporting with fire yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in some ways this was a reaction to the feedback that was provided about the work we're doing, to say that's all very interesting, the work you're doing, except it's not legal to use fire to receive, for a lab to use fire to receive eRequests. And that, I think this was a result of that issue. But yeah, I don't think they then went and asked, well, how should we do this? And all of a sudden it's out there. Going to go, oh, hang on a minute. And this is also, I imagine, I don't know, from a NADA perspective, I imagine this is about determining a capability, not making an obligation on every piece of data that's exchanged. Some of those things are not clear in this either. So anyway, I think it is up for some more discussion. Ruben?
I think sorry, Ruben, yeah.
Yeah, look, it's definitely up for more discussion. I'm also, I guess this is to your previous point, Andy, this is stipulating a standard for actual real world implementation. Now, I'm not sure if one can, when we get to referring to eRequesting, even if it's a specific version of it, whether there's enough specificity for it to be adopted as is, or whether it actually needs to be profiled to sort of constrain certain things to meet that particular real world use. So that's the other point. But I guess my broader point is, how do we take this forward? Can we work with David to iron out some of these questions and figure out a way forward?
Yeah, the ICPA, I think, is ultimately the most pragmatic way to create a way forward in this, because they, I understand, are the kind of the starting point for this. So yeah, we'll have I'll make it David Willick when he's back in 2 weeks to actually run a session on this formally, so that we can formalize some position around this and how we want that to be described. I don't think I fully understand the implications of the NPAAC interpretation. So for instance, there is nothing said here about I don't know, a third mechanism, right? I'm gonna receive a request, via carrier pigeon. Now, is just because I got that and nothing is said about that mechanism in the NPAAC guidelines, if I used it, does that imply I am not meeting accreditation? even though I do support, say, the V2 pathway, I've already got support for that. It's all good. Do I actually need to say anything about, you know, you can actually fax me a signed request, you know, or you can email it to me. Is that then unstated mechanism? You know, something, because I think that in some ways was the instigator of this change. It wasn't about wanting to formalize the FHIR-based requesting. It was to not say that you can't do that, or to say that, yeah.
I see that as like the Medicare schedule also comes into this. It has clear, says what is a request and what isn't in the terms of claiming against Medicare, right? I mean, if you're not claiming against Medicare, you can write on the back of a napkin, do what you like. But if you want to claim to Medicare, there's rules in there, and they are very loose, like, because they're covering paper requesting, right? They just go, oh, you need a collection date, you need a date of service, and things like that, and that's kind of like the minimum bar. And then this was trying to say, well, in Australia, we'd like to also do electronic ordering, so you've got to use ADRM, electronic reporting and ordering, and then I guess FHIR was always just out in the limb as like, well, is FHIR allowed? Because FHIR ticks the Medicare requirements, right? But then this thing said you must do ADRM, so that implied that you can't use FHIR. But you know, if we have the new standard in 5 years now called water, can I presume I can't use that, you know, until someone updates this spec.
Yeah, and that's the confusing thing for me, is when you say you must do, is that saying you must have a capability to support that, or is it saying you are not allowed to use any other means apart from the one you must do? And you also pointing out like the requesting versus reporting. You know, there is, last time I read it, as you say, it probably is more aimed at reporting, but requesting is in there as well. I mean, it identifies the request. So it's then are you formally to disallow any means of receipt that isn't the recognized standard? So, you know,
I think they're trying to say, like, if you're going to use version 2 in this world, then it has to be ADRM, right? If you're going to use paper form, well, use paper form, there's no standard, right? Like, and if you're going to use FHIR, then use the Australian eRequesting standard, right? Not just whatever you think you're going to use in FHIR. So I like to think that's their intent, is they're picking out technologies that have been possible technologies that could be used, and pointing out if you're using one of the ones that have been standardized, you need to use the standardized version of it, not just your own interpretation of it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll invite David Willock to kind of do something next time around that, because I think we do need, as you said, Ruben, I think we need to figure out what we want to do as opposed to what everyone else wants to do.
Sounds good. Ruben? Thank you. Sure.
Water, web terminology and resources, excellent.
Couldn't resist.
Good.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about, I'm pretty sure I saw Brett come in, is we are looking to go to ballot next year for the changes that we're working on. Those changes will be the bundle profile. It will be what we agree to say about Specimen to give a starting point for the specification of a request, a specimen information associated with a request, and to do the transfer of fulfillment, aka claiming, aka patient choice. And we're going to do that hopefully in time for ballot next year. And that means we need to follow a process of getting to that ballot. And in particular, we do need to work on the timing of a notice of intent to ballot, and we need to do that this year in time for balloting. So we only have a few months to go. What we're going to do is lay out a sequencing that will make it very clear to the working group what we need to do and when in order to hit the timing that will allow us to go to ballot next year. And that's going to be creating a implementation guide that is testable. Ideally, we will be looking to wrap all of that up prior to the Connectathon in Melbourne. That will then be an opportunity to kind of shake the IG that we come up with and test it at the Connectathon, and then that should kind of generate the sequencing into the ballot next year. Any questions about that? I haven't done the sequencing yet, but I do plan to do it by next meeting. Okay, so that's the formal publication. We are incrementally adding into the CI build as we agree to stuff. So the bundle stuff's in there. We will put Specimen in there when we get agreement. The thing though that we discovered that we need to do before that is publishing an errata to 1.0.0 of eRequesting. Why do we need to do that? Well, turns out that the originally requesting spec that was published earlier this year has a dependency on IPS because of the use of pregnancy status. So we went through a long conversation with the clinical design group talking about the representation of pregnancy status, and we got to an eventual agreement that where someone wanted to positively state patient is pregnant, and there was a mechanism to do so, and we leveraged IPS. Unfortunately, we chose to use IPS 2.0.0, and there was a problem with IPS 2.0.0. So Michael Osborne has created a JIRA ticket for this, which is highlighting the fact that in IPS, when it was published, they had some issues with extension references that meant they were referencing something that wasn't actually included in the published implementation guide. And that reference then creates issues for anyone that has a dependency on IPS 2.0.0. What eventuated, and I'll point everyone to this lovely Zulip conversation, is the creation of an errata to 2.0.0 of IPS called 2.0.1, which corrected the referencing to the extensions and to the R4 extensions. So it turned out that AU patient summary was just in the right timing that they could actually move to reference IPS 2.0.1, not 2.0.0 as we did. So what we need to do is publish an errata to enable anyone who's trying to use eRequesting 1.0.0. We need an errata 1.0.1 which fixes this dependency. So Michael Osborne has, not that one, this one. Michael Osborne has been, oh, I know, I was going to show this. So this is our current CI build, but it still has a dependency in there on 2.0.0. So Michael Osborne has built a new version of the IG that has no other changes apart from migrating the dependency to 2.0.1, and that fixes the problem when you've got a dependency on our eRequesting standard. So if you're interested in the mechanics of it and why this is needed, I will put this, I'll put this link in the chat.
It's no clinical change at all to anything we've done. The pregnancy status is exactly the same, doesn't change in any way. It's a bit like a product recall default, you know, that there was a mechanical error in the way all the IGs check each other because they had a broken dependency down in their system, which was nothing to do with the actual pregnancy status. And it just causes us pains when we run validators now because it keeps complaining there's this broken reference, which has nothing to do with us. It's lost in their stuff.
Ruben.
Yeah, nothing to do with the why you're doing this or how you're doing it, but more general question as to why rely on that particular profile in IPS instead of just creating your own and tag it as aligning with the IPS one?
We could do, but that would be a more substantial change, which I don't think we could do through an errata. So
yeah, I agree.
I think that would be a valid thing to take through to the next ballot, and that someone suggests we make a change and move across to that. The other thing we were trying to do was to, I guess, stay lined up with what AU Core would do, but the problem was that the clinical design group weren't at a point where they wanted to, I think, engage with the issue yet. They wanted to have more thinking about the consequences of this and what they saw is the appropriate representation. So this was kind of what we'd already done in production in industry, and that's kind of, we just carry that through. So I'm all up for a discussion about change, but at the moment, my biggest issue is that this actually breaks the validator. If you inherit, if you try to do something based on our spec, we can't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, that sounds fine. I mean, the reason I actually brought this up is because by adopting that profile directly, you're also adopting its approach to must support and its defined obligations. And I'm not sure how you've harmonized that with the obligations you have in eRequesting. So I would,
and I think what we will end up doing is probably doing the AU patient summary approach, which is to then, as you say, you make it you get an extension that does
aligns with or complies with one of those.
Which I've had to use on patient because the IPS spec has a subject.patient that points at IPS patient. Then I've had to use that to say, oh, their patient's the same as my patient.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andy.
Okay. Any other questions? We're going to. It's basically at the moment a technical change that, as Angus pointed out, has no consequence for the use of this. It just fixes something that's broken. So I guess I just want to do a vote now to say that yes, this is something that is reasonable to do, and that the work group agrees that we can do this without needing to go through a formal ballot change for this, that it's just an errata with no consequences for implementers or for from a clinical perspective. So I don't know if anyone else wants to, if anyone's willing to put forward a motion to say, yes, the Errata is an appropriate approach to fix the recognized problem with IPS 2.0.0 dependency by moving it to 2.0.1. We should be able to just move forward and push this out as a new publication, but we don't need to go through all of the balloting stuff. Can someone motion that?
I can motion what Andy said.
And I'll second
Excellent.
it, Zoran.
And Zoran.
Thanks, Zoran. Is there anyone that wants to vote against publishing this errata? Is there anyone who wants to not vote or abstain? All right, it's unanimous.
26 minus 3. Thanks.
Yes. Alrighty, thank you for that. So Angus, we've probably got half an hour left. Can you make value out of that 30 minutes to prosecute Specimen?
We can go a bit further. What did you have other stuff after that? Like, are we trying to squeeze 2 things into this half hour? Transfer.
No, I just want to do this. I guess say to everyone that you know, the claiming stuff is going to get a little more complex to talk about probably because it's new for many. The specimen stuff, Angus and I had a bit of a chat yesterday about this, and I think some of the stuff we'll talk about now, but I think we do need to keep in mind the practicalities of this, and that while FHIR inevitably puts in front of you all sorts of interesting opportunities about the wonders of structured data that you could create in the universe and things, I think we do need to be quite practical, and especially leading into the ballot, what we're trying to do is, rather than being completely silent on something, is at least we give a starting point for a way forward. We're hoping that the approach we align to is not going to need to be rolled back at any point. So it's better to be lightweight and allow for a way forward than it is to try to step too far without the implementation experience to then subsequently find out, I think we actually kind of overreached and we need to roll things back. That becomes more problematic if someone starts to actually do something with it. So just with that, we're kind of looking to make sure in the next kind of couple of weeks that we can get something that can be then enough to take us through to the ballot cycle. So Angus.
I'll share my screen. Right, so Specimen, just quick recap. We're recording the of a collected sample. So you've placed an order, and I want to tell you about a sample that I've already collected for that order. We're talking about, in the FHIR resource sense, we've got our service request. We're talking about a new specimen profile for this specimen resource, and we're talking about this service request pointing at that specimen, saying here's the specimen for this service request, or specimens. I won't go through those. Where we got to last time is we started walking down the tree of the properties. So here is our specimen resource, make it big, and we started looking at the key things and we're trying to answer these must supports. What's critical that we decide what must or must not be provided. And in doing that, we had made votes on these ones, like 20 people voted positive that type would be must support 1.1. And that's where we were getting to. And we'd got up to this highlighted one. That's why it's highlighted. We hadn't voted on this. And I'd like to maybe start with this because I don't think this one's very contentious. And see if we can vote on that. And then it probably gets into this discussion that Andy just alluded to. So let's just focus on request. And if we look at that in the specimen profile, we're talking about this request property here, which is saying why the specimen was collected. And we're trying to debate, like, do we set this or not? And I guess this, I think we got to this point last time, ran out of time, because we suddenly then realized that that's kind of like this diagram here, right? Like, we're focusing on the connection between the service request pointing at the specimen. We need to make a decision about what do we do about this arrow that points to the service request. Is that something we want or not? And so if we just read the blurb on it here and look it up, take me to it. Much requested. Request. Why can't I find it?
You just make it a bit bigger, thanks, Angus.
Yeah, let me just get to them. Just search. When I get there, I'll make it bigger.
Okay.
Find it. Where is it? Request. And in circles, I am going around in circles. Now, let's go back. Request. Details concerning a service request that required a specimen to be collected. I think that if I click on this, I'm not taken to the. This up. Here out. Now I can make it big, David.
Thanks.
So this is what it's saying about this property. Details concerning a service request that requires a specimen to be collected. Why the specimen is collected. Request may be explicit or implied, such with the service request that requires a blood draw. So I guess the question here is, whilst, and I'll open up service request as well, in maybe R4. It's service request. We have this specimen here. So I think we'd all agreed we're going to use this, that this would be 0.1, or sorry, 0. Star, saying you can connect specimens to service requests where the service request points to the specimen, one or more specimens, and I'll click on this one. So specimen, one or more specimens that the laboratory procedure will use. Many diagnostic procedures need a specimen, but the request itself is not actually about the specimen. This element is for when the diagnostic is requested on already existing specimens and the request points to the specimen. It implies to. Conversely, if the request is entered first with an unknown specimen, then the specimen resource points. So the specimen resource points to the service request, which is the thing we're talking about. So conversely, if the request is entered first with an unknown specimen, and I think this is where we got to, we've now got two arrows, right, pointing at each other. Do we use both arrows, or do we just say, no, you just point at the specimen and the specimen doesn't need to point to the service request, or does it?
We have in the past tried to avoid this because we ran into this issue with tasks in the past, and I guess there's a couple of things in this. Obviously, when you have a reference from the service request to the specimen, it actually makes doing includes more efficient when you're searching for, you have a service request and you want to include any specimens that might be there. If you don't do it that way, you've got to do a reverse include, and computationally that can be more challenging to do. So that's, I guess, one thing to note. The second one obviously is that R6 takes away that service request link. And so their intention going forward is that it's the specimen that links back to the request, which follows the same pattern as consent or something like that. So you attach the specimen to the thing that it was about, not the other way around. So kind of, I would personally have kind of gone to be forward thinking, and the one that needs to be must support is actually to imply where we're going should actually be the link on the specimen, and that the request to specimen one, I don't think we want to say anything about
But you just made the comment about the includes, which is a comment to say that it's desirable to have the other one, isn't it? You just pitch a case for one and then pitch the case for the other.
Well,
so,
it's not like there's no way to pick up the specimen if you don't have a link, because reverse include it works. Like so it's not a significant issue. It is, you know, if you're truly worried about efficient operation, I think you would and simplicity, you kind of want the include one, but I don't think we have enough implementation experience to make a call one way or the other. And the only reason I was saying I'd give more weight to the specimen to service request link is that is where it goes in future.
Just looking at that, this is R6 we're looking at here. So you're saying if I go to service request in R6, the specimen property's been removed, is it? Yeah, it's gone. Right,
there's actually a note on it. I think it's top, or maybe it was in specimen. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Remove deprecated.
Okay, so the fact that they're signaling already that they're reversing out of that, so we probably should drive down there.
Yeah.
I guess that sort of answers it. We need to be going specimen to service request because other people are going that way as well.
Yeah, it's not like it's anything broken by doing it. It's you know, you kind of can either direction works. I wouldn't have any issue if you stuck it in there, but I think that's why, you know, you kind of want something to orient behavior to, well, if you're going to do one of them, do the specimen to service request. Sure, do both if you really want to.
But yeah, we'll put must support on one and not on the other. I mean, you can do whatever you like, but we're leaning into the other one. Just hands up. So Dan.
Yeah, so this is where we ended up last time, closing out the meeting, was because how do we handle the add-on requests?
Add-on request, yep. So
because we use the same specimen for another service request.
Yeah. So an add-on to that.
That's where I don't think. Yeah, I think that's a special case where it would make sense for the request to be referencing the specimen. The other thing is that when you create the add-on, that you actually create a new specimen resource.
But it's the same specimen physically. I don't know if I agree with that.
But it's not the when you do an add-on, it's not the person asking for the add-on that's actually dictating the instance of the sample, right? Like if you had a whole lot of chemistry and you had a couple of bloods, maybe 3 serum tubes, and you're saying I want to add a test onto the samples that were collected before, and obviously I'm adding on a test that requires serum, so obviously some of the serum you collected before, but you're not saying you must use tube 1 of the 3 serums you collected. Like you're kind of usually ringing up the lab or asking the lab to do an add-on, and they're checking, do I have enough serum to do what you want? And they are going in and saying, look, we've got 3 tubes, and then, this one's got enough in it, we'll do it on this. Not necessarily this instance you are telling them to do. Does that sort of make sense? Like the add-on is saying, I want to do more tests on the samples you collected before. Which one of the samples I collected before? Well, whichever one you can do it on. Like, obviously you can't do the chemistry test on the urine. You need to do it on the blood. Yes, but I've got 3 blood tubes. Which one of the 3 do you want me to do it on? Is not the doctor's decision. It's the lab's going, well, we've got 3 tubes. We'll do it on the 3rd one because it's got some blood left in it. So I'm not sure if...
The other thing is, I think it's very likely that people will have the specimen as a contained resource in the service request. And unless we're explicitly going to constrain that, then you can never reference that sample, that specimen anyway. in a second service request. So you kind of would be led down this path of having to replicate the specimen resource. I think it's a very interesting, it was kind of almost something, as Angus and I talked about containers and specimens yesterday, it is a very interesting thing where you talk about the physical object versus the information that describes it. And if you've got one physical object, are you only allowed one piece of information? What happens if you replicate the information? All roads point to the same physical sample because there are some physical characteristics that are all described with the data you have, but is there any issue in that data being copied? And does that necessarily mean there are two physical samples because there are two specimen resources if they have exactly the same data in?
Dan, are you able to
just the lab system?
Dan, can you describe, like, from your world, like how an add-on? Do you know the steps that sort of happens when the doctor wants an add-on in your world? Like, are they? Is it automated? I haven't seen it automated often. I have seen Sonic automate it, but not to the point that the doctor says this sample. It's more the doctor saying, I want to add on a test, and then the lab is working out, can I do that with what I have left?
Yeah, I guess that is a valid point there, and I'm just wondering how we achieve it myself. And so the scenario would be, it might be just a GP or a specialist out in the private, out in the community. They send us an order, and based on the results, they may just, they'll just send a request to say, well, based on those results, I want to add this on to that specimen. So
I have traumas of when I worked in the lab of taking phone calls often, where you would get a phone call from a doctor saying, I want to add a test on. And the reason he's calling is to confirm that we can do that, right? Because if he just sent in a paper form saying, add on this test, and then that takes a day to get to us, and then we get into the lab, and then we go and look at the samples and go, well, there's no sample, no blood left, right? So now we're like 2 days later telling him, well, there's no blood, you can't do that, right? So what actually happened is he would ring us up and say, I want to add on a test. And we'd say, give me 2 seconds, I'll go check. And we would go and look at the samples and go, yep, there's enough here, we can do that. And then we would actually then instigate adding the test on, and we would print a request form back to him, which would arrive on his desk. He would literally sign it and then send it back to us as the legal construct to say, I'm adding this test on. And of course, if he rang us up and we said, there ain't any blood left, then he'd be like, right, we're not doing an add-on, we're doing a rebleed, doing another one, right?
Yeah. And I guess I'm just sort of like, I'm not limiting us to that. I'm thinking more future proofing what we're doing here, in that we can do this electronically rather than having the doctor call up. So
I think we can, and I think we can, but I don't think the doctor on his end can never know whether there's enough blood left in the tubes, right? So
no, that's right.
He can't necessarily tell us the instance of the sample to do the add-on. Like, of course, if there's one blood, like I ordered one test and there was one tube, he can say, well, I want an add-on on that one tube. But as soon as that's not one tube, he could say, oh, I want an add-on on one of these 3 tubes. Like, I don't think him telling us the tube is a lot of benefit. It's what he wants to electronically tell us, I want to add this test on, and we can electronically, maybe in 20 minutes, come back electronically and say, we can't do that, no blood left, or we can do that, and we will be doing it on this sample, right? Not the other way around.
Yep, I can accept that.
Yeah, it's great conversation. I wish I was in the medical profession to really appreciate it. But I guess from the data side of things, that the way you look at specimen itself, and are we collecting enough data about that specimen in terms of like the volume and how we've captured it, and can you use a specimen really more than once? And if so, do you acknowledge the fact that I've used the same piece of material? Again, coming down, what is a specimen? Because you're either going to consume the specimen in the test, I would have thought, or at least a bit of it. So are we tracking? Yeah. So are we going to track the life cycle of this specimen?
So we're really talking, this tends to happen at scale with blood tests, right? Like it's rare, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's rare with like swabs and urines and stuff that you add a test on, you could, but it happens at scale with blood, right? Because when you do chemistry tests, there are oodles of tests that can all be done on serum. And therefore what tends to happen is the doctor might order like 5 tests for chemistry. The collection nurse will look at that and go, "Oh, that's a lot of tests. I better collect 2 samples, or maybe even 3, right?" And that's just their finger in the wind, right? They're just going, "Wow, that's a lot of tests." And in the laboratory system, now not on the doctor's side, not on the collector's side, but within the lab, they do have measurements of how much, right? So if they get a 10 mil serum tube, they know there's probably, I don't know, 3 mils that are usable. And that's not done because they look at it and say there is 3 mils in there. That's just done because it's a 10 mil tube and it should be full there. So there should be 3 mils that are usable. And then they do, in some systems, say the liver functions test will consume 200 mils, and they can add it up. They can go, look, we've got like 10 tests. They all consume 200 mils. Have we got enough, right? That's happening in the lab, but it's not happening at the doctor's end. And it's
and whether or not we need to extend it out there or not. And it's funny because you used another word there. You said sample. So is it a sample before it's a specimen?
I'm probably just throwing words around. The sample is what's inside the container. Is I can get particular.
And that's my job, to be particular. So that's what Anyway, it's good point.
I don't think like the millage thing is a thing when you're in the lab really doing the detail, but on the outside, doctors aren't necessarily saying I've collected, like the tube automatically is a 10 mil tube. So it's like, but they don't tell us I've collected 3 mils in the 10 mil tube, or like they will tell us the tube type manufactured by a manufacturer and it's a 10 mil tube. So it's implied there are 10 mils in there. But it might have been a hard bleed, and all they could get were like 0.5 mil in that tube,
Yeah. Point taken.
So I think the add-on thing is still electronically capable to be done in the future, but it's not. I would imagine it's not. Maybe in a very closed system, but in a community sense, it's not. The add-on is not specifically calling out the instance of the tube that the add-on is to be done on. So they would send in an add-on and say, I want an add-on, and electronically, in an automated way, someone's going to go, someone physically has to go, do we have enough blood? Yes, we can do your add-on, and we have chosen to do it on this serum tube because that's the one that's got blood left in it. And then you can message back to the doctor saying, success, we will do your add-on, or failure, not enough sample, we will not do your add-on. But I don't think we need a doctor to literally tell us the tube.
And they're saying that what they're moving towards is that every time when I have a service request, that the next something related to the service request will tell me here's the specimen, because it's not required in the
I think the add-on service request that's created later would not necessarily state any tube. I haven't I collected tubes on the first request, and I collected 3 tubes, right? And I may record those 3 tubes and say, here's the 3 tubes I'm collecting for this service request. And I send it into the lab, day 1. Day 2, I want to add a test on. I think you would just send in a test service request without a sample, because you're not giving them another sample. And that test needs to be marked as like add-on somehow. We haven't talked about that. So I'm asking for an add-on. And then it's the lab's job to process that add-on request with a yay or nay, depending on if they can find enough serum sample to do it on. So it's not the doctor deciding which sample to do it on. The lab decides, do I have some sample to do that on? No, or yes, I do.
But the doctor only sees 1 specimen. He does not see 3 tubes, and the request has to link to the specimen.
It doesn't have to link to the specimen. So the doctor, if he's collecting,
yes, because it's been collected.
where you have 3 identical tubes, right? 3 serum tubes.
But
The
the
doctor's
doctor does not know that. And he doesn't really care about that. All he cares is that you've got a specimen.
So we're talking about where a doctor collects the specimen, right? That's why we're asking for specimen information.
But that's so unusual. It's much more likely that it's at a collection centre. That's the norm.
I agree. So we're spanning 2 cases here, right? Like there is a doctor who says, I want these tests done. I'm not going to collect the specimens. Go to the collection centre and have it done. And in that scenario, you're right. He doesn't know whether they collected 3 tubes, 1 tube. He just sorted out, right? And therefore he doesn't know. But where he is collecting the samples, that's our use case here. He needs to tell us about the samples here because he's collecting them. And then you could argue that tomorrow he could tell you, I want to add on that sample that I collected yesterday. But once it's at the lab, he doesn't know if there's any blood left in it.
Yeah, but he's not really going to care about whether it was the first tube or the second tube.
Agreed.
He's just collected the sample.
Agreed.
And we're using sample and specimen a bit interchangeably, David.
Anyway, my view is I think with the add-on scenario doesn't actually mean the doctor's going to tell us exactly which specimen to do the add-on on. It's just a request to add on, and the lab is the one that will tell him we will be doing it on this sample.
Yeah, thinking through that scenario and the others that we're sort of thinking, that I'm thinking through, that sort of does apply.
Doesn't also that in theory that when you do the add-on and you're sending off a new order, that order is now coming from the pathology lab, and that the identity they overlay on the specimen that they want that add-on order to be associated with, it's now also got an identity relative to the pathology lab that's requesting the add-on to kind of it's quite distinct from the identity that was given to it by the original practitioner. I think I'm also saying here that I say just the practicality technically is it's very likely that those specimen details, specimen and container included in the specimen, that those specimen details are going to be contained within the service request, because there is nothing else that references them, and there is no drive for, unless you've got 2 service requests that are referencing the same sample or the same specimen. Sorry, I'm not going to use the word sample. Same specimen. Obviously, you can't do that as contained within a service request. So unless you duplicate it. So there's kind of that side, and we have not really ever in our specs given guidance on which resources you can contain and which ones you can't.
So
that's an interesting thing. So there might having multiple service requests being tested for against a single specimen. So that then sort of breaks the specimen to service request link.
But it can be many, can't like this is many. So one specimen can point to many.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
one specimen can point to many service requests.
Right.
So I'm edging. I'm thinking. In
theory, you could add on your add-on, but if you wanted to.
Well, the lab could add on your add-on, right? Like
yes.
you put in a service request saying, I want to add on this test, but I don't know if there's any blood left in any of those tubes. And then the lab would come back and say, there is enough blood left in tube 3. And if they really want to get detail, they then update the specimen 3 to have a reference to this add-on test that you're asking to be added on. And then that reflects back to you going, yes, we can do this. And we're going to do it on tube 3 because that's the tube that's got blood left in it.
But don't forget, you're not. Yeah, if you do, if we had, yeah, okay. No, I'm not going to go there. the one tube, one specimen.
Do we think we can vote on? Are we close enough to this understanding that requests would be $1. So would it be 0? Like, are we going to we're not going to entertain the idea of a specimen just sort of floating around without a service request? That not for interoperability, right? Like, don't send to the lab. Is that true? Don't send to the lab some information about a specimen without it pointing to any order, right? Like, because labs are now going to be like, well, what do I do with this specimen? Is it you just giving it to me for safekeeping or to throw in the bin maybe? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
Do we want to allow specimens to not be pointing to service requests?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
So I think it's one.
I'm happy. Yep.
$1 must support. We definitely want people to consider this, not just ignore this. And the reference would be to our AU eRequesting service request. Can I propose a motion that we vote that specimen.request be $1 must support and it must be a reference to AU eRequesting service request?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay. Vote.
Is anyone against it? This is saying nothing about the link from the service request to the sample.
No, agreed.
But
we
who was first to motion that? Was that Angus?
Angus.
And second?
David Webber second.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone? Yeah, we're dropping. Anyone? No one wants to vote against it. I didn't see hands raised. Raise your hands if you want to abstain. All right, we're all good.
Is that 21 minus 3 or something?
3, yep, that's,
Yep.
18. Cool.
Sorry for your maths.
Yep. Test me out.
Well, we got one mate. Okay, so now we're into, I think, Andy, maybe that discussion we had yesterday. Like, is that where we go here? So, because the next one's, well, I guess we could do collected. Like, does anyone think that we shouldn't have a collected date on a sample? I would have thought that's not too controversial, is it? If you're going to give me information about a sample, then surely you would have to be giving me either, and if we look at the thing, the complication is date time. So I don't think we want to restrict this. You can give me a date, point in time when you collected this sample. I think we allow period, probably less frequently used, but no harm in having it. That might be a sample that's taken over a period of hours. Not sure, like a 24-hour urine. Like, I think would be wrong to not let them use it.
That's 90%. A long urine.
Yeah. Well, how do they do it?
You would have
every urine they have over 24 hours. Yeah.
You'd have multiple specimens in that circumstance.
No. So 24-hour urine's like a big jar like that, and they're literally saying to you, for 24 hours, every wee you have in that jar, please. Isn't that what they're doing?
I think they're separate, aren't they?
Yep, that's exactly what they're doing.
Could be wrong.
That's exactly what they're doing. No, that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, let's not complicate it anymore. It is. Yeah.
Okay.
And in there, you could be particular enough to say, I started my 24-hour urine at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and I finished at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, right? They probably often just say, I started at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and don't tell you when they finish because it's a 24-hour urine and we kind of know it was 24 hours, but that's not for us to deny. Like, I think period is a valid thing to do, but not the most common thing to do. So is anyone against, like, do we lock this down to just a date and not allow period? I don't think so. Does anyone object to that?
We allow period.
Yeah, allow period. So it would be collection is 1.1. You must give it to me. It must support, and it's date, time, or period. Motion
Well, that other model had duration underneath period. So that's slightly different though, right?
How long it took to yeah, I guess yeah, duration, how long it took to collect.
It took me 24 hours. I'm not telling you what 24 hours it took. I guess that's the difference.
Yeah, what's the difference between collected period and duration? Span of time over which the collection of the specimen occurred is different to this as a time period defined by a start and end date and optionally time.
It took me 24 hours to collect the urine.
Yeah, it's funny.
I don't want to speak for any, like, from a clinical perspective, but it might be to handle a scenario where, well, it was a blood draw, but because of whatever reason, it took 4 hours to do the single draw.
Yeah, it's a screaming kid who wouldn't let us. We had to pin him down, and that took half an hour. I don't know how important that is to everyone, but it's. I
don't think we're going to disallow it at this point. But if there is some interesting experience that then says we should absolutely support this because of these use cases, then that'd be great.
I agree. I think duration it's there. You can use it, but it's not. We're not calling it out as the primary thing you have to do, but we're definitely calling out the primary thing you have to do is this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I motion that collection.collected will be 1.1 must support, and we allow date, time, or period for that one.
Second.
Happy. Yep.
I think Dan won there.
Yep.
Anyone want to vote against that? Anyone abstaining? Okay, I think we're 18. Angus, we probably have to.
Running out of time. We're done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have any more than this?
No, we're just walking down this tree, and then there's a discussion. Yeah, I think we're gonna probably body side is getting to the point of that discussion we were talking about, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's draw close because I know last time I went over and I shouldn't have.
Yep.
So
Yep.
2 minutes to go. We will come back to that with a half-hour week. I think next time we're going to have David Willick talking about the NPAAC stuff next time, and I think we are going to have to bite the bullet and start the claiming discussion next time as well. Angus has said to me I need to be pragmatic and just not go for exotics, and we'll just go straight down the line just to make sure we have a way forward. So we'll start that next time if we can, at least with half an hour discussion. Anyone have any last minute things they want to say we need to do at the next meeting?
I would just say for the next week, think about when we collect these samples, how much burden are we going to put on the doctor? Like, because we could say, you need to tell us the sample, you need to tell us the container type, you need to tell us, like, there's many things we could ask for, but there's a reality of what are they actually feasibly going to do for us, right? Like, what do they do today? They kind of write something on the sample. Like, so just think about, we could be asking for many things, but we need to be reasonable about what we're going to ask. And that's this next discussion that we haven't got time for now, like body site and container type and sample type. We need to start working about what of those three do we really need.
And I got a sample and I got 4 specimens out of it.
Yeah, I wasn't even talking about like the multiplicity. Just one sample. Like, you can just describe the container. You can describe what's in the container. You can describe how you collected it. And remembering today, doctors don't kind of see it that way. They just go left arm swab of wound, right? Like, and now we're going to say, no, that's 3 drop-down boxes. You got to pick left, you got to pick arm, you got to pick wound, you got to pick swab, and it's like, and they're going to be like, you're making my life hard. So that's the conundrum we have to start talking about next time.
Dave McKillop.
Just a quick one, I would just suggest that body site mightn't be as quick as you think because it's dropped in R6 and they use body structure instead.
No, I think from here on it gets hard.
Good, that's a good note, David.
Yep,
and on that note, we'll